welcome to Newsline. I'm Catherine Smirk.
And I'm Ted O'Connor. Coming up on today's program, we look at Australia's struggling film industry, ongoing controversy over children's beauty pageants, and Victorian Labor's inability to deal with the issue of gay marriage.
But first today, an Australian soldier has been killed and 2 others have been seriously injured in Afghanistan. 32-year-old Sergeant Brett Wood was killed by an improvised explosive device during an operation in Uruzgan province, and the 2 others are seriously ill in hospital. In a separate incident, 3 Australian soldiers have been wounded in a gunfight with insurgents. Sergeant Wood's death brings the total number of Australian troops killed in Afghanistan to 25.
And the eruption of an Icelandic volcano could shorten Barack Obama's trip to Ireland because of the smoke and ash being blown over Scottish airspace. London Airlines cancelled flights between England and Scotland this morning, raising fears there could be a repeat of the airline delays and groundings caused by an Icelandic eruption earlier this year.
The prestigious Cannes Film Festival ended yesterday, celebrating a year of great films around the globe. However, I had a closer look at the film industry back here in Australia, and the industry is facing serious trouble. Three promising Australian films were released on the same weekend across Australia last month. All 3 flopped. Films Griff the Invisible, The Reef and A Heartbeat Away aren't even coming close to making the amount of money the government has spent on them. This is the trailer from A Heartbeat Away, which is proving to be the biggest loser of them all. It cost $7 million to make and nobody wants to watch it.
Do you have to play so loud?
It's rock and roll.
Luke Buckmaster writes the film blog for online publication Crikey.
I think that's one of these times when we look at something that's gone beyond a flop. It's a cataclysmic, apocalyptic failure.
Mr. Buckmaster says these films fail because our government doesn't look at the film industry from a business perspective.
If the Australian film industry was actually run as a business, I think you'd see the whole place go bankrupt within a couple of years. I mean, the centre would just collapse right out of the Australian film industry. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why it's important that people not only start to look at Australian films in terms of their commercial prospects, but move into genre filmmaking and perhaps give out a larger amount of films a smaller amount of money.
The Cinema Nova in Carlton has long been a supporter of Australian films. They screened Griff the Invisible with limited success. Manager Christian Connolly says that profitability isn't a priority for the government.
Box office. If it's government-based, then what you tend to do is find films get made that maybe really don't appeal to an audience, and they might be very well made. However, at the end of the day, when you see the final film, you say, "Who is this made for? Who is intended to come along and see this movie?" And
upcoming director Patrick Pearce is frustrated about the bad reputation these films are giving the Australian industry.
When you get these bad ones coming through, it just reinforces society's idea that you can't see a good film in Australia, or that it's going to be too art house or too not commercial enough to sell. And so that's something that I think that as filmmakers we have the responsibility to really change.
A huge amount of taxpayer money continues to go into films that have very little success. People are beginning to wonder where their money is going and why it's being thrown away. But there may be a solution. Anthony Ganane is the president of the Screen Producers Association of Australia. He says the solution lies in a fund called the Producer Distributor Film Fund, or the PDFF. This would help make our films more commercially viable and therefore more successful.
The PDFF tries to create a funding model for films in that middle range. A loan fund matched by distributors to bring distributors more aggressively into the production analysis very early in the piece, much like in the success that we have in Australian television, which is massive compared to what we have in Australian feature films. Largely that's because nothing gets on Australian television if a broadcaster hasn't been involved very, very early in the piece. There's a commercial mentality, an end user mentality, a market mentality brought to bear on the process.
But whatever they decide, the government is going to have to do something if Australian films are ever going to compete at the box office. Catherine Smirk, Newsline.
Thanks for that, Catherine. And now we join news correspondent Alexandra Flood. And Alexandra, the death of another Australian soldier was not the only disturbing news for the Defence Force.
That's right, Ted. In what the Department of Defence has called a lapse of procedure, surgical instruments used in medical operations on Australian soldiers may have been contaminated with hepatitis C and HIV. The potential contamination occurred when the instrument steriliser was not properly used at the Army Hospital at Al Minhad Air Base near Dubai. Now, this air base services most of the Australian Defence Force personnel in the Middle East, including those in Afghanistan. Interestingly, the breach of protocol occurred between February 2009 and August 2010, yet the Defence Force only released this memo last Monday. The reason for the delay in the release of information is yet to be determined.
Alexandra, can you tell us about the recent organ donor controversy?
Yes, Catherine. According to the findings of a parliamentary inquiry, Victorian patients in desperate need of organ transplant are missing out, and it's not due to a lack of organs. It's been reported today that hospitals are unable to manage excess organs because they lack resources. Organ donation by deceased persons has increased by a reported 30 to 100% in the past decade. But the hospitals are saying that they cannot deal with the increased supply of organs, and in some cases, organ extraction has actually been stalled. Chief Executive of the Alfred Hospital, Andrew Way, told the inquiry an improvement in surgical, nursing, medical and operating theatre resources may help ease the clogged system. About 80 people die each year on waiting lists for organ transplants. Mr. Way was approached by Newsline but declined to comment on this issue.
And US President Barack Obama's recent visit to Ireland has been a success.
Yes, that's right, Ted. He got in touch with his Irish roots over a pint of Guinness and met up with a distant cousin in the local pub of his great-great-great-grandfather's hometown. He even suggested his surname was missing its distinctive Irish apostrophe. However, an impending cloud of volcanic ash did mean that Obama had to leave the island early, and that's his newfound homeland, ahead of schedule, touching down in England on Monday night. This stop was a soft beginning to what's likely to be a challenging 6-day tour of Europe for the President.
Thanks, Alexandra. There's been a protest this afternoon in front of Parliament. The people there were objecting to the use of extreme beauty treatments in children's pageants. Emma Buckley-Lennox reports.
Controversy around child beauty pageants began in America when reality TV show Toddlers and Tiaras showed images of entrants being tanned and waxed.
Tear it! Don't tear it! Ah!
It's all done.
No, you tear it out!
Yeah, but it's all done. See? Look how pretty it looks.
As some Australian mums and tots are embracing child beauty pageantry, the creators of Toddlers and Tiaras are bringing their show down under. But not all parents are happy about that. Protesters gathered outside Parliament House this afternoon, calling on the government to impose age restrictions on child beauty pageants in Australia.
Children's beauty pageants represent a very particular and dangerous idea of femininity that is perpetuated by a heteronormative Australian society.
At the end of the day, this sexualises the kids. It doesn't build their confidence, it doesn't allow them to be children, it severely damages their emotional development.
It's a big difference between dressing up and putting on your mum's makeup at home to doing that and then being paraded against other little girls and then being told whether or not you're beautiful. And I just don't think that's an appropriate message for Australian children.
Emma Buckley-Lennox, Newsline.
Thanks for that, Emma. Still to come on Newsline, the latest in business, sport, weather, plus Victorian Labor Party's bungling of its policy debate on gay marriage.